Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens, the screenwriting step-by-step project, episode 205. My name is Glenn Gers, and I come to you every Monday through Friday, if I can make it, at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I do this in order to demystify the process of writing a script. I'm just letting you look over my shoulder, share my screen as I write a script in order to show you the tips and techniques, tricks that I taught myself in a 25-year career writing movies and TV for Hollywood, and I just thought this part of screenwriting is kind of undertaught. There's a lot of great people telling you how to structure a script and how it makes a great script, and all that's true, but they don't say the one thing that I think is really true in my experience. It's not great if you can't write it. And the process of writing, the process of getting your ideas down into an outline, into a rough draft, turning that rough draft into a rewritten, polished draft, that process, it's a mechanical set of techniques and tricks, experiments and explorations, and I just want you to see somebody do that so that you get a sense of what it's like. If the way I do it doesn't work for you, don't do it. Everybody does it their own way. These are just some tricks I figured out to help organize the chaos of reality into the limited, narrow form of a script. It's an artificial thing to do. Not many people have this experience, so I thought I would show it to you. If you are interested in some really specific lessons on things like character arcs or dramatic action, go to my main channel, and the first 3 playlists especially are Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. There's a lot of stuff on there, but those 3 playlists, they're a bunch of 10-minute videos that I tried to boil down those topics, basics of plot, basics of outlining, try to get them into really practical how-to. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff, it is here. What I'm doing here on this project is just showing you how I write using a lot of those ideas in a practical way so that maybe you can pick up some tips and tricks and get some confidence to do what you want to do. Hello, Maritalitoso. Good evening, Rachel Waring. Okay, I should say, by the way, there's 200 episodes of this thing at an hour each. You don't have to watch all of these. You can come in late. You can leave early. You can drop around, pick up a piece here and there. It's not like there's a carefully organized plan. I'm just coming here every day and doing some writing and talking about what I am doing in the hope that I'll stumble on something useful to you. But your main job is to do your own writing, not to watch 200 hours of somebody else writing. Okay. Hello, Donna Nelson. So yesterday we worked on the outline. I wrote some notes to myself. I'll show you what we did. What I did was, in this first scene, I had too many ideas. And so I said to myself, which idea is the main thing? And I made a list of myself of what the ideas were, and then I tried putting them in different possible orders. Oh, this one, this one, this one. Because I've got 3 or 4. I really can only use 2 or 3 at best. So something's got to go. And what I realized is that there's really only one possible path, because the thing I wanted to end with couldn't go from the thing I needed to start with. So now I am going to try and take that path in the script. Hello, Butte. Hello, Di. Good to see you all. Great to have you all here while I trudge through, as I said, it's a process, rewriting the script. One of the things I think that you might have noticed or hopefully have picked up is the way you rewrite is not by correcting it. It's not like you go through and you say, now I'm going to go through and I'm going to start on page 1 and I'm going to mark it up and then I'm going to type it up and then it's going to be done. Sometimes you do that, but sometimes you're just like, these couple of scenes, they're not working. I have to figure out what's wrong with them. I have to rewrite them, not the whole thing. So that's what I've been focusing on is I've got about, I would say, 60-70% of this script is in good shape. It's in polishing shape, where you're just fiddling with the language. Then there's this 20-30%, which is just the scenes aren't right. They aren't scenes yet. They are not doing their job. There's good pieces in them. There's good ideas. So what I'm mainly doing is working on those. So today, it's the first scene. Now, one of the things you'll also see is that if you've been following along, you'll have seen me come back to these scenes often. The troubling scenes, and there's always some scenes that are easier to do and some scenes that are just a knotty, tangled mess. And what you do is you get as much of it untangled as you can, but then you move on, do other things, come back to it, because sometimes the things you understand in other scenes will help you to untangle the overly tangled ones. So that is what I am doing. I'm coming back to this. Now, let me just look at my outline again here, because the point is I'm going to start with poison. See, there were several topics covered in this big, long speech that he does. So what I have to do is stop clinging to these particular lines. They're nice lines, but they don't work to lead your mind to the moment I'm trying to get to. What I'm trying to do is hook you in and get to his declaration of revealing new evidence. That's the point of this scene. I've got too many detours. By the time we get there, it's too slow. In theory, you could build a brilliant, complex, long aria, which I like to call it. Like in opera, there are certain numbers which are like the big highlight song. You could do that here. I don't want to. It's not worth it. This is not the point. I am going to try and simplify it and say, okay, we're starting with a hook. The hook is poisoning. And then we're going to get directly to what he's claiming he's going to do. So, see, this story is not good. Oh, where did I put it? Where did I even put? Here it is. I put this. Okay. Sometimes sometimes you just get a scene and it just comes out great. You just like write it and the rough draft is like, whoa, there's good stuff in here. And then it just magically works. And then others you have to just construct. Some of those are good. Some of those are really good. Some of them, they always feel a little clunky. I am going to try and make this one of the best ones. It's ruthless in rewrites is not a bad thing. Okay. So, in theory, this is my opening. Hello, Natasha. Hello, Mookie MC. Is there a certain guidepost to look for or a certain question that needs to be answered before you feel a situation or scene becomes untangled? At what point do you let go of it? That's a good question. Is there a certain guidepost or question? I think the answer is when you read the scene, does it, quote, work as a scene? And you do get to understand what working as a scene means. And I hate when people in the business say, oh, that doesn't work, because it's such a vague, subjective thing to say, which always sounds like it's objective. Like, there's a test on whether that works. Do you plug it in and the light turns on? Then it works. That's not how working works. What I look for is when a scene begins, do I understand what the person is trying to get to, what they're trying to do, what action they are taking, and then do I understand what the problem is that they're facing in that attempt, and when the scene deals with that, trying to get something past the obstacle, or do they get it? Whatever it is, I need to understand that the scene is about an action. That's when I feel it's untangled. Right now, the thing is, I've got like a checklist of things that they're all in here, but it feels like it's disorganized, it's tangled, it's not unified into a scene. A scene is an action. No matter how complicated that action can be, how many bits it may be broken up to, it feels like it's one thing. This scene doesn't feel like it's one thing. It feels like it's too many things. Now, that one thing can often be a changing thing. That's cool, but you can feel it. You can say, I understand the conception of this scene. I know what they're doing. Right now, George's speech kind of stops and starts. It almost works, but not quite. So it's not like I'm too far away. I think the reason that it's not working is that he's got different sections of the speech that don't flow from each other. So that's what I'm trying to do here. What I'm trying to think is, yeah. The victim, I'm going to read this out loud because this is what I do. I want to see if this is the right opening for the scene. Like, the idea is that, like The Godfather opens on this close-up of this guy and he says, I believe in America. And then he tells the whole story about how his daughter was attacked by a man and the man got away with it because they were Italian and he wasn't. Anyway, the point is that speech has a point. It's a story he's telling. In this case, the hook is the problem is that the hook is kind of, it's a good hook, but it doesn't flow into the rest of the story. So the question I have to ask is, do I want to? I like starting with the description of the poisoning. Thank you, Natasha. Okay. The victim first feels a buzzing, thickening numbness of the tongue and throat. They feel frightened. The room seems to spin. They can't focus. They can't feel. They are fully aware that something insidious is creeping through their bloodstream into their nerve endings and brain, but paralysis is already setting in. They are unable to move or speak, frantically trying to get oxygen, but they can't. That's not bad. That's a tricky one because the answer is kind of both. You want to show the character's personality in the first few scenes and then gradually throughout the story. Both are true. Either if you're going to show the character's personality immediately, which is good, but then it has to develop by facing a conflict or an obstacle or something that, in other words, a character has to develop. They have to change or reveal more of themselves. They can't just be the same person in every scene unless the whole point is that they are single-mindedly one thing and that what they have to do is change others, and that's cool too. But it depends on what you want to do with this character. If you want to study how someone changes and grows, then you want to show them immediately and then show them having to change. If you want to show somebody who gets revealed hidden depths, then you show a surface element right away. No matter what, you need to define a character right away. Absolutely important in the first few scenes to define them as something. It may not be everything, and that's the key. So the answer is both of those things. You need to both show their character personality right away and in every scene, but then it has to either gradually change or gradually reveal more complexity. That's the complete answer. So if I start with this speech, frantically trying to get oxygen. And so they die. And so they die. But paralysis, frantically trying. They can't focus, can't feel. Yeah, too many words. Okay, there we go. Now that reads a little better. Okay, so now let's try this. The victim first feels a buzzing, thickening numbness. Numbness is not my favorite word, by the way. The victim, it reads really good. See, I could change it. I could. I'm a writer. I'm allowed to change these things. The victim first feels a buzzing, thickening of the tongue. A buzzing, thickening of the tongue and throat. It goes numb. They feel frightened. Thickening. Feels their throat. Feels their throat, tongue and throat, buzzing, thickening. Going numb. The victim first feels their tongue and throat thickening, going numb. They feel frightened. There's tingling. They hear buzzing. They feel frightened. The room seems to spin. They can't focus. Buzzing, numbness. There's buzzing, tingling. They're buzzing. Buzzing, tingling, prickling. They feel frightened. The room seems to spin. They can't focus, can't feel. They are fully aware that something insidious is creeping through their bloodstream into their nerve endings. But they are unable to speak or move. Paralysis is already. They hear buzzing. Their flesh tingles. They hear fear. The victim first feels their tongue and throat going numb. Thickening, going numb. They hear buzzing, tingling. They feel tingles. They feel pins and needles. The room seems to spin. Feel pins and needles. That's better than tingling. Okay. You're frightened. Can't focus. Ah, that's better. Okay. Okay. The victim first feels their tongue and throat thickening, going numb. They hear buzzing, feel pins and needles. The room seems to spin. They are frightened, can't focus, can't feel. They are fully aware that something insidious is creeping through their bloodstream into their nerve endings, but they are unable to speak or move. Paralysis. Paralyzed, unable to get. Paralyzed. Unable to get oxygen. Unable to get oxygen to their brain. They die. Well, this is definitely better than it was. Okay. Motivation is the idea I tried to establish earlier. That is answering about whether you start a character's personality in the first few scenes or gradually. The final scene of the movie could reveal the character's true personality, especially good to set up the sequel. Yes. So the answer is, I would agree with all of that. That when you say someone's personality, one of the most important things you want to establish in their personality is not just that they are a type, but they have something they are doing. Once again, I urge you to watch my videos on dramatic action, which is really the key to understanding what it is we care about when we watch a character. If you are not defining if you're defining their personality by a way of talking or a personality type, like, oh, they're arrogant or something, they have to be arrogant about something, and that something has to be a dramatic action, has to be a story element. So that, I think, is another way to say what Mookie is saying. When you are creating a character, you are also creating the story. It's not like you set up the character and then tell the story. Character and story are interwoven inextricably. You cannot have character without story, and you cannot have story without character. They do not exist separate from each other. In fact, I believe I have written that down somewhere. Yeah, character creates action. Who they are defines what they do, motivates what they do, but what they do defines who they are. It's going back and forth. It's a worm that eats its own tail. Also remember, characters always develop, unfold, play out. They don't exist statically. Character is not static. Even if they are unchanging, they still unfold, or they develop in the sense that they're being tested or challenged, or we fear that they will change. In some way or another, you deal with unfolding, developing, and playing out when you are doing character. Okay. So now, here's the question. How do I the victim first feels too many. Here's one of the things you don't want to do. You don't want to have like they are this, they are this, they are this, they are this. Well, for the moment, that's closer. Now, here's the thing. This is generalized, but I'm going to go to I was 9 years old when this guy died, because the point is that the chemistry set killer was a big influence on him personally, but has become a cold case. And I think the first thing Murray Simpson felt when the poison began to act upon him, felt when the poison entered his system was his tongue. See, this is a whole other way to do it, which I think is going to be better, because the first thing, what we're going to do here is make it a story instead of a generalization and then a story. Because the generalization, while probably cool in an abstract thing, is actually not going to flow into the rest of the story, the rest of the speech. His bloodstream. Bloodstream. Okay, so I'm going to make this whole paragraph a his instead of the anonymous they. Okay, so the first thing Murray Simpson felt when the poison entered his bloodstream was his tongue thickening, his throat going up. You see, that's the other thing. See, these are just things about his tongue and throat thickening, going numb. That's tongue and throat thickening, going numb. It's very abstract, but if I say his tongue thickening, that's yucky, and we get upset. It's his tongue thickening, his throat going numb. See, that's more of a story. Okay, so now the first thing Murray Simpson felt when the poison entered his bloodstream was his tongue thickening, his throat going numb. You're all caught into that. See, that's the point. Okay. His ears were buzzy. He heard buzzing. He felt. There was buzzing. There was buzzing. Pins and needles. There was buzzing and pins and needles. The room seemed to spin. He was frightened. Couldn't focus or feel. He was fully aware. That something insidious was creeping into his nerve endings. But he was unable to speak. He was already unable to speak. Unable. That's a problem. That's what's bothering. Paralyzed. But he was unable to speak or move. His paralyzed lungs. Stopped getting oxygen to his brain. And he died. Okay. Oh, no, that's not a stupid question at all. When you say two parts, you mean here, this break? I assume that's what you mean. And the answer is, you don't want to write a speech this long without interrupting it. Sometimes you interrupt it with these little beat things, or you can put like, you can change that up and go size or something, if that's appropriate. The main way you break it up is with these things. These little descriptions of physical actions or mood or something to break it up. The main thing is, no one in Hollywood will read a long speech because they don't believe that a long speech can play. They're wrong, of course, but they don't want to hear. They don't want a speech that long. So what you do is you fake them out. By putting little descriptions in the middle. It's purely a way to break up a section for the reader, because the reader in Hollywood, and also just any reader, can have a hard time with a long speech or a long paragraph of description. So I am planning to put something here. But at the moment, I just had left it blank. I knew that I had to break it up. Also, I'm going to get rid of some of this. So I was just focusing on this first thing, because it's a good, this would be considered a long speech. In a movie, this is a long speech. I am about to do something 3 or 4 times as long. So therefore, I want to break it up and not scare my readers, because Hollywood readers get very scared by large blocks of type of any kind. They don't want to see large blocks of description, and they do not want to see large blocks of speeches. So does that answer your question, Di? That change is a cool way to develop the urgency and bring. Yes, exactly. There's a good thing. How can people know what Murray actually felt? This is a good answer. A good question. The answer is A, nobody does. He's not testifying in court. He's doing a podcast. He can say whatever he thinks he felt. But second of all, one of the things that true crime people do is you try and put yourself into you do research on what happens physically, and then you say, this is what I think that would feel like, and this is the steps of the process. In other words, there is a medical research you can do on what a poison would do to you. Would you feel hot? Would you feel numb? Would whatever. Those are things that you can research. Then you imagine, and then you do a speech. Famously in the book, which is much better than the movie, Perfect Storm, by Sebastian Junger. He is writing about a crew of fishermen who died. They drowned, as far as he knows. Nobody knows what really happened to them, but he researches what the likelihood is, and then he researched reports of other shipwrecks and discovers certain common things. And especially he has a whole chapter where he talks about a report of someone who almost died, who drowned almost to death, but then was saved. And he uses things like that to say, this is what a person who drowned but recovered reported. And therefore, my guess is that when they were in the boat and the water was filling it, this is what they experienced. It's a true crime or journalistic technique. It's also just good drama. It's just a good show. So more answer than you expected, wasn't that, Hyperabs? I was wondering why you use they. They is kind of impersonal. Yes, or at least depending on the context. But in this context, when you're talking about the general type of victim, with he, you're suffering like a chaos. Writers are sadomasochists a bit. Indeed, that is true. Yes, my idea was that since, remember, George is putting on a performance. George is performing for an audience. That's what he's making a podcast. He's doing a show. And so I wanted to try and figure out what his performance style is like. There's some performers like TED Talks, where they start out with a question and then they do that. Sometimes they'll tell a little story. So I thought, what if he does like a general philosophical statement and then brings it into the case? But now I'm thinking, no, it's more storytelling, just because it's a better speech. And yes, writers can indeed be sadomasochists. One of the main things that we do when we read is we read so that we can experience things that we don't actually want to experience. I don't want to experience being poisoned to death. I don't want to experience poisoning a person to death. But in fiction, I can think about those things. Hi, Larry. Hi, I write. What's your process for coming up with a story? Do you, hold on. Boom. I will get to that. R.I.P. James Caan. Indeed, James Caan was a fabulous fabulous movie star who did many, many fabulous roles, and apparently was a very nice guy most of the time. Anyway, so yes, indeed. Rest in peace, Mr. Caan. Good. Yay. Okay, Hyperabs. I'm going to get to you on the coming up with a story, but let me just do a little more thinking about this momentary scene that I'm momentarily in. He's paralyzed still. Stopped getting oxygen to his brain. And he died. All because of a sandwich. Became the 10th victim of the chemistry set killer, and he became the 10th. The reason I'm not saying I'm changing it from 10 to 11 is because 10th is better to say out loud. When you say 11th, it's just blah, blah, blah. He became the 11th victim. Became the 11th victim. It's just hard to say. Became the 10th victim. Okay. So... okay. Now, how many, I have to completely rethink this part because I just have to get all the, like he's going to be the last victim instead of the first. CSK. Maybe weeks before. And laced a jar of mustard in Murray Simpson's kitchen. Okay. One of the questions I have is how long was he? I have not said. Had broken in days. Broken in days. CSK had broken in days or maybe even weeks before and laced a jar of mustard in Simpson's kitchen with a unique mixture of plant. Murray Simpson. He was victim number 10. I could also taste 12. That's okay. 12, 10. Those are easy to say. Take that out because I'm going to put it here. The chemistry set killer had broken in. The chemistry set killer had broken in. Okay. What I'm thinking is, reading from pages of handwritten notes. All right. Well, this is better. I've got a good start. See, he was victim number 10. It's going to sound like this chemistry set killer is victim number 10. In different states, different ages, races. The poison itself was the only thing. The murders was the only thing the murders. Not like was the only thing. Was all the murders. Was all the murders had in common. His signature. That's good. That's good. All right, we're doing better. Okay, let me get. What's the process with coming up for a story? Do you usually come with a concept first or a character? The answer is, as before, yes. The answer is just like an earlier question about. Oops, sorry. I'm just trying to see. The earlier question was, do you show a character's personality in the first two scenes or gradually? And the answer was yes, because the answer of both of these questions is you're dealing with things that are inextricably linked. They are actually parts of the same thing. Character and story, concept, plot, all character, they all are the same thing. So the answer would be, what do you come up with first? It doesn't matter. Different things, different times. Whatever you come up with is going to be, you're going to come up with something because it sparks in from some experience you have in life. Maybe it's reading something and saying, oh, that makes me think of this other story. That happens to me a lot. You'll be watching something or reading something or hearing something, and it will be a story. And you will think, oh, that makes me want to write a story like that, or think of an alternative that I think is better, or think of the opposite of it. Whatever it is, very often you're hearing or seeing or thinking about a story, but then it makes you think of another story. But sometimes you'll hear about a character, you'll hear about a person, or you'll see a person, and you'll think, oh, they would be interesting in a story. And the story is kind of implied by the character. For instance, if you say the character is a go-getter, then the question is, what happens to the go-getter? Do they get or do they not get? So therefore, as always, I would say that, hold on, character defines action, which is the story, and the story defines the action. The character creates the action. In other words, people act out of their character, out of their needs, out of their thoughts. But what they do is how we know who they are. If somebody beats up strangers, then they are a bully. That's the action that tells us who their character is. So therefore, these things are constantly creating each other. You can't have a character with no action. There's no such thing as a character with no action. If they're not doing anything, they're not a character. They might be a type. In other words, you might have like a little cardboard cutout, or in video games, they have character building parts where you decide, are they going to have big arms or small arms? That's not a character. That's physical traits. What they wear is not a character. It's a sign of what they do, or how they feel, or what group they come from, or what group they want to be in. Whatever that is, it's still not a character. Action is character. Characters are known by what they do, and why they do it. Therefore, character and story, that's all one thing. So the answer is, it doesn't matter which part you come up with, because the very next thing you have to do is come up with the other part. So if you get an idea for, oh, it would be so cool if there was a story where it turns out that this guy is his own grandfather. Obviously, we're talking about some kind of sci-fi or time travel thing, but the point is, right now, that's a plot. Okay, or a plot moment, the revelation or problem of being your own grandfather. So therefore, then you have to think, well, why did they get into that situation? What did they do, or what happened to them that put them in that situation? And what about them is either being changed or tested by that, so that the character then becomes part of it. Like in The Fly, he's a genius who invents teleportation because he doesn't like travel, because he's afraid to fly. That's his character, is a person who applies his scientific genius to his personal problems. Okay, so yes, where does inspiration come from? Where's inspiration? This is a bigger topic for another time, but the answer is, anything can inspire a story. Anything can inspire a character. Sometimes it's somebody you meet or know. Sometimes it's something that you read or see. Sometimes it's a thing you want to say, a message that you want to give. You want to say, I want to tell a story about how somebody refuses to be violent. Cool. So that So how can we define action without telegraphing the story or what a character would do? In a sense, no, you don't. You don't want to avoid that. you want to do that because by telegraphing the story, telegraphing the story is great. Telegraphing the end of the story is not great, but that's not what you do. You telegraph the story, the beginning of the story. When you want to tell a story, you start with a problem, a question, a thing they want. The thing you don't want to, quote, telegraph is to not tell the ending. So what we're getting at here is the famous 6 essential questions, which are, sorry, I'm in the way. Who is it about? What do they want? Why can't they get it? That's all character. Okay, what they want, why can't they get it? That's the obstacle that they are going to face. What do they do about that is defining their character. As I have said in that fabulous video I made, if facing an obstacle, they decide to gather a group of people and solve it together, that's a very different person from one who decides to go it alone. Somebody who decides to kill the person in the way is very different than the person who decides that what they're going to do about that is write an article and get the world to know about the wrongness of their story. So what you're doing is you're telling the story by defining the character and the action, and then further developing it. So the answer is anything is fine because whatever you start with, you'll have to get to the other stuff because any story requires them all. That's the answer. Yesterday I read, you can just call me Glenn. Yesterday I read After Hours PDF script after a suggestion to my question about organic spontaneous development was also coherent. Thank you. Yeah, it's quite a story. You should watch the movie because it's very stylishly done and quite amusing and fabulous. Yeah, and there are so many good stories that develop sort of, quote, organically. Just keep looking. Just keep exploring. I would just say that the list is actually so huge I can't even begin to imagine it, to think about it. I mean, for instance, like there's a show, Better Call Saul, which is not quite done, but it's getting pretty close to being done, which is fabulously organic. It will spend, notoriously, they will spend weeks with a character slowly proceeding according to their personal needs. Far less than a really mechanical plot story. So Better Call Saul is an incredible organic development, and yet in the shape of the overall thing, you find that there was a development. But honestly, like in this past half season, there's an elaborate scam con thing being planned, which takes like 6 episodes. We're talking like hours of screen time, of planning, of taking steps, which leads to an action which is a revelation of an entirely other story. I'm very carefully not giving anything away here, but the point is that's, I think, phenomenally organic development in that they take their time to explore the steps and ramifications and personal interactions of a story. Obviously, that's not a movie. Anyway, there's so many. Yes, next episodes are coming soon. Okay, so where are we? I'm going to have to come back to this, obviously, next episode, which will be, I believe, hold on, let me just check my calendar without showing it to you guys, because you don't need to know what I'm doing all day. Next week, yeah, I'll be here Monday. I won't be here Tuesday, but I will be here Monday. So on Monday, we are going to get back to this speech, and and we are going to make it even better. We got a good start. This first quarter of a page, third of a page is working. So far, so good. We'll just put that right here. So far, so good. Yay! Okay. How many more tangled scenes do you need to work through? I think it's like 7 or 8. 7 or 8 big, but they're big scenes. They're like, these are the biggest, hardest scenes. Anyway, in one of my stories, the protagonist is a young adult being aided by a young woman to deal with his demons. So the true protagonist is the woman. Could a dynamic like that work? Absolutely. Many, many stories have a combination of characters. And honestly, it's important to remember this, protagonist-antagonist thing. That's a relatively solid way to look at stories, but it's not the only way. You can have several characters who are the center of your story. It doesn't have to just be one. You just look at models, look at stories you like, and see how they are doing that. Look for stories where you have a character helping another character. There's hundreds, thousands of good stories like that. So just like there's one called Witness. Witness is about two very, very different people. There's a Philadelphia cop and an Amish woman who are trying to deal with the fact that the woman's son witnessed a murder. Who's the protagonist? The cop is, but in many ways is being aided. He's trying to do something which requires the aid of other characters. So, I don't know. I'm just saying there's lots and lots and lots of stories like that. Anyway, so yeah, let us head towards saying go write something, because that's what we're going to do. That's where we are going. I look forward to seeing you. Have a great weekend. We will get back to this speech on Monday. So until then, go write something.